Greetings to you and many thanks for joining us on Rwanda Television News tonight. Our hopes that you had yourselves a great and productive day. Now welcome to our edition. These are the headlines. Muslims in Rwanda were urged to uphold values aligning with the betterment and development of Rwandans. The media is hailed for an important role in uniting and rebuilding the Rwandan society in the aftermath of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. To international matters, the White House blames militant group Hamas for the failure to reach a ceasefire with Israel before the end of Ramadan. Good evening to you once again, and thank you for keeping us company on Rwanda Television News. As we started off, while celebrating Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of the month of Ramadan, Muslims in Rwanda were urged to uphold values aligning with the betterment and development of Rwandan citizens. Prince Panzi starts us off.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
At Kigali Pele Stadium, thousands of Muslims gathered for a prayer marking the end of Ramadan. God enabled us to conclude it well, and we believe that God received our prayers. I requested many things, including safety for all. Praying and supporting the vulnerable do not stop from here. Instead, we have risen a level of faith throughout this time, and we continue these deeds. During the prayer, Muslims were reminded that the Ramadan day coincided with the reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, hence no celebrations. Rwanda's Mufti, Sheikh Salim Hitimana, urged Muslims to be on good comportment and play their part in the country's development. It does not stop here because we are concluding Ramadan. Rather, it has to continue for the development of their personal and spiritual growth. Muslims across Rwanda have been urged to continue to abide by the instructions set as Rwanda commemorates for the 30th time the genocide perpetrated against the Tutsi.
On the same date as today, April 10th, 1994, was one of the most memorable dates as innocent lives continued to be massacred in various parts of the country in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Cedric Irakoze takes us back.
Karangwa Polnel was among a thousand of people who fled to Gahanga Catholic Church on April 10, 1994. He lost many of his family members after the attacks of Interahamwe and the military. There were many, and this room was full of people. My entire family died here, including my 3 sisters and their children. Finally, I survived with only 2 people. In the legend known as Karembure, Valence Shimimana, who was 8 years old at that time, remembers in details the brutal killings of his family and the others.
Karembure haguye abantu benshi cyane kuko Karembure uretse natwe twari tuhatuye.
A lot of people have died at Karembure, even us who lived here, and we have a unique history of people who ran at Eto Kichekiro, all survivors of Eto hidden in forest of Karembure, but Interahamwe saw and killed them. Victims of genocide against the Tutsi were littered around the city of Kigali, and it required government vehicles to transport these bodies to hospitals, including the University Teaching Hospital of Kigali, Sehashika. Jeanne d'Arc was a nurse at the hospital from 1970 to May 5, 1994. Her husband and children were all killed. On that day, there were bodies, patients who came normally to get treated, but Interahamwe killed them in the meeting room. We remained with soldiers and in Interahamwe treating them 24 hours. After stopping of the genocide against the Tutsi by the former RPA rebels, survivors are proud of the country's development. Whenever we reached that Sonatip, everyone said, this person is from Gahanga. We have tarmac road, electricity to everyone, and now Gahanga is an amazing place. We also have industries, and our kids get employed as well. This is all because of our good government, led by His Excellency, President of Republic of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. He brought us security, medicine, supporting widowers. Truly, I'm very thankful to RPF Inkotanyi. This date in 1994 in different areas such as the former prefectures of the Kigalingari, Gikongoro, Gisenyi, Byumba, Kibungo and Cyangugu. A large number of Tutsi were massacred. Cedric Irakoze, RTV News.
Thank you, Cedric. And moving ahead, the media, especially radio, was a major catalyst in the preparations and execution of the 1994 genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi. Likewise, the platform has been a major player in the unity and reconciliation and rebuilding of the Rwandan community that has been divided and devastated by the genocide against the Tutsi. Christelle Uwase with the details.
After a multi-party split in the 1990s, hate speeches against Tutsi intensified through the radio media, especially in the art of songs that were passed on to incite hatred and murder against Tutsi. Things got worse after the launch of RTLM radio in July 1993. As Yanone Solange, a professional journalist who have been around for a long time, explains.
Radio yagize uruhare mu kubiba urwango gutuma abatutsi bangwa.
Radio was involved in sowing hatred, causing Tutsi to be hated. The thing that was said on the radio, for again, it was considered as a word of God because it was one radio. So, anything that could be said on radio was considered as a principle. That's why, by listening to RTLM and Radio Rwanda, people really felt that they were encouraged to kill Tutsi, because Tutsi were treated as enemies of the country who should be killed, and due to the fact that radio was one, people didn't have the ability to analyze if what they heard was true. Only after the genocide against Tutsi in 1994, radio became a good channel for uniting Rwandans through unified talks and reconciliation programs. Rukundo Charles Ranga is the script writer for Msekeweya, one of the theatrical programs that contributed to the transformation of the minds of many through theatrical performances.
Twahereye mu byukuri ku byari byabaye mu gihugu ariko dushingira kuri bwa bushakashatsi turema inkuru zizafasha abantu.
Of course, we based on what happened in the country plus the research. Then we created stories that will help people get along better. From our stories, you find two hills that were struggling in conflict, because it all starts by saying we and them. And then you find that some call other perpetrators of the existing problems, and that is not the real case. Now it shows how conflict arises, and again, how people sit together and see what they can do to reconcile. Our stories have been very useful to people who have loved it and continue to give us their thoughts and testimonies, which makes us productive in peace building in those years that are now going to be 20.
Bakaduha n'ibitekerezo bibyo twakongeramo bituma rero tugira koko umusaruro dutanga mu gihugu mu kubaka amahoro muri iyo myaka ubigiye kuba 20 Musekewe yihita.
One of the beneficiaries of these programs is Wimbabazi Chantal, who believes that due to the program episodes that took place on radio, she has been transformed.
I heard two sides that were having conflicts. And then, as I kept on listening to the story, I felt like it was similar to what happened in 1994. But as time went on, as the theater continued to give us the trainings, and even listening to it, all the bad thoughts and hatred we had held have diminished, and now we are living with others in peace without any problem.
bigabanuka tubanye n'abandi mu mahoro nta kibazo.
70% of Rwandans receive information on radio, and this emphasizes that the role of the radio in dissemination of peace and the message of unity and reconciliation is huge. Christelle Wase, RwandaTV News.
Charles Ayodeji Deogun Phillips, a former United Nations prosecutor specializing in genocide and war crimes, shares insights into the challenges encountered in delivering justice to survivors of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Back when he started as he assumed the role of the senior trial attorney and lead prosecution counsel for the Kibuye and Kigali rural trial teams within the office of the prosecutor. Take a look.
I've divided these challenges into three parts: institutional challenges, procedural challenges, and practical challenges. I only have 20 minutes to speak to you this afternoon, and I will try to address those three challenges in that time, with a lot of difficulty, of course. The first institutional challenge that we as prosecutors faced was this: who bore the greatest responsibility for the genocide? Why did we face this challenge? Because the preamble, the statute of the ICTR, reserved the investigation and prosecution that the tribunal was dealing with only for the ringleaders. We were never interested in the foot soldiers. And you've just heard talk being made about 6,000 cases in the local gacaca system. Well, we needed to have the gacaca system because we were not going to deal with more than a handful of 70 indictees. In fact, at the end of the day, I think we dealt with just over 70, or maybe 80. 62 of them were convicted for genocide and crimes against humanity. Of those 62 individuals, as you heard, my team and I obtained the convictions of 12 of them. So 20% of the tribunal's work we undertook with great success. Now, in determining those who bore the greatest responsibility for the genocide, quite a few things were considered. Their position in government or in the military, their status, the geographical region that they emerged from. I was leading two areas. In those days, we called them prefectures in Rwanda. I led the prosecutions from the Kibuye prefecture in those days and the Bugesera region, and the Kigali rural prefecture. If anybody knows anything about the genocide, you'd very quickly realize that those were the two main areas in Rwanda that suffered the highest casualties during the genocide: Kibuye and the Bugesera region. And in determining those who bore the greatest responsibility for the attacks on Tutsis in those regions, there were a foray and a myriad of considerations that had to go in. Do we go after the military? Do we go after the religious leaders? Do we go after the political leaders? Do we go after the local leadership? And even if we go after the leadership, at what level or strata did we want to go after those people? The second challenge related to apprehending suspects. And closely tied to apprehending suspects was the issue of state cooperation. Now, we all know that international tribunals don't have police forces of their own. We have no law enforcement powers. So we ultimately have to rely on the cooperation of member states in the UN and in the world to help us arrest the fugitives. Well, we know the story. that not all the countries in the region were interested in supporting our work in relation to arresting fugitives. The ICTY in the former Yugoslavia was no exception. But when we finally overcame that challenge, one of the highlights of the ICTR, as opposed to the ICTY, was this. Unlike the ICTY, the ICTR was terribly successful at apprehending the top echelons of Rwandan leadership, and not the foot soldiers. We actually succeeded in arresting the ringleaders. The ICTY was not that successful at the beginning. Towards the end, they got the leadership in, and they started with the foot soldiers. We always had the leadership. So one of the very first detainees that we had in Arusha was Clement Kaishima, Ubedru Zindana, Dr. Elisafani Takuturomana. Alfred Musema joined them shortly afterwards, and the like. Now, we had some challenges in relation to gender-specific crimes. And a lot has been said about this. But unfortunately, the reality of life and wars is that wars are not only fought on battlefields, but they are also, unfortunately and sadly, fought on the bodies of women. Now, we came across quite a few challenges in this, and I identify with one of my panelists when she seemed to suggest that there existed a culture of silence. But before we start to talk about the culture of silence, one of my experiences in investigating and preparing for the prosecution of Mika Muimana, which I led in 2004 rather. The Mika Muimana case had to do with a serial rapist. And one of the witnesses that we had shortlisted in that case had given a very robust statement about her witnessing the rapes of other women. And when I went to see her with my assistants and my team, I then asked her a very obvious question. Well, Madam, how was it that you were able to witness all these rapes occurring without you being raped yourself? At the time, I had a young colleague by the name Florida Kabasinga. Florida had been my intern when I prosecuted the Intakitu Romana case 3 years before. She had now come back to the tribunal as a fully fledged staff member. And for the first time in the prosecutions, I had the benefit of having a native Kenya Rwanda speaker. For some reason, this woman felt very comfortable with Florida. And when I asked her that question, she turned and looked at Florida and said, "Can I be honest with you?" So I looked at Florida and I said, "What's she saying?" And she goes, "Calm down." And then she said to Florida, "In Kenya, Rwanda, actually I was raped." I noticed Florida's countenance changed. And I'm not understanding what they're talking about. I'm looking at her, what's going on here? This is, calm down. So she calls me aside and says, "Actually, Charles, she was raped." And I'm like, "She was? Well, why didn't she say? Can I ask her?" She says, "Yes, you can." So I went back and I sat down with her. She says, "Madam, why do we have a witness statement that doesn't mention the fact that you were raped?" Again, she turns to Florida, almost like seeking approval. Should I answer? And then she says, When the investigators came to interview me, and they interviewed me 3 times, they were all men. They were all male investigators. And I didn't feel comfortable talking to men about being raped. Now, we had gone there with a team full of ladies, by the way, not knowing what had happened during the investigation. That already tells me one of the challenges about investigating gender-specific crimes. But she didn't stop there. Her pseudonym was AB, Witness AB. Witness AB then spoke to me through my assistant and said, actually, I am ready to testify about the fact that I was raped, but on one condition. And that condition is, you tell Mr. Prosecutor that I will testify about my own rape so long as he can guarantee me that my husband, my new husband, my present husband, who I never told about being raped, will never find out. I looked at Florida and very quickly I said, yes, I know we have the most robust witness protection measures at the tribunal. And we have beautiful rules that protect witnesses and give them pseudonyms. But that was one guarantee that I was not willing to give. You know why? Because for me, it was tantamount to double jeopardy for this young Tutsi woman that had managed to rebuild her life many years after the genocide, found a man who showed interest in her, loved her, married her. And for me, in one fell swoop, sitting on the lakes of Lake Kivu in Kibuye, in a guest house, to take a decision that, well, yeah, I need your testimony so much. You come, I'll guarantee you. It was a risk I wasn't willing to take. So I dropped her. Painfully, I dropped her as a witness. But that experience with her showed that first, there is a culture of silence. And because there is a culture of silence, obviously, because culturally, rape is not what African women want to discuss, whether we're talking about Nigerian women or Rwandan women or Ethiopian women. Therefore, certain mechanisms have to be put in place to be able to deal with investigations.
Welcome back as we transition it to international matters. The White House blames militant group Hamas for the failure to reach the ceasefire with Israel before the end of Ramadan as Washington prepares for a high-level meeting on Israel's plan to invade Rafah and faces lingering questions over the killing of 8 workers by Israeli forces.
The White House says that Israel is ready for a ceasefire after 6 months of brutal fighting, but that Hamas leadership is unwilling to meet Israel's terms and release some of the hostages seized during the October 7th attack on Israel, which provoked an Israeli military campaign that has flattened much of Gaza.
There could be a ceasefire in place today that would extend for several weeks, to be built upon longer if Hamas would be prepared to release some of those people. So let's train the attention where it belongs, which is that the world should say at this moment to Hamas, it's time. Let's go. Let's get that ceasefire. We're ready. I believe Israel is ready.
Family members of some of the American hostages met with White House officials Tuesday to press for their return.
What we have heard is that there is a deal on the table right now that all of the parties agree to and are willing to work with. We are waiting now, and the world waits for Hamas to get to yes. It is in their court.
The Biden administration began calling for a ceasefire a month ago, but not all Israelis want one. On Monday, this group marched near the Gaza border to demand the opposite.
Instead of telling the international community to place pressure on Hamas to release the hostages, they're placing pressure on Netanyahu and our government. We didn't start the war, they did, okay? They murdered 1,200 of our people.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also seems determined to press forward with plans to attack the southern city of Rafah over Washington's objections.
We will complete the elimination of the Hamas battalions, including in Rafah. There is no force in the world that will stop us. There are many factors trying to do this, but it will not help because this enemy, after what he has done, will not do it again.
Analysts say U.S.-led diplomacy is critical to ending this conflict and warn that Hamas, which has deep roots in the region and strong ties to Iran, is a formidable foe whose appeal may be growing in the face of Israel's assault on Gaza and on Iran-supported groups in the region.
It remains to have tremendous popularity currently across the region, which is very disconcerting as well, because this is a form of radicalization that the United States and its allies should be concerned about.
But as Israeli bombs rained down Tuesday, not on Gaza but into neighboring Lebanon, the prospect of peace feels very far away. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
Viewers' report brings us to the end of tonight's edition. But before stepping out, here's a quick recap of the headlines. Muslims in Rwanda were urged to uphold the values aligning with the betterment and development of the Rwandan citizens. The media is hailed for an important role in uniting and rebuilding the Rwandan society in the aftermath of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. And to international matters, the White House blames militant group Hamas for the failure to reach a ceasefire with Israel before the end of Ramadan. And that's all from us here at RB's Rwanda Television News. On behalf of the entire news production as well as the technical team that made it happen, many thanks for being with us. And up until next time, stay safe and have a great evening.